Hello and welcome to the Canyons Are Calling podcast. I'm Charles Jocelyn, your host for the show. So shout out to my newest Patreon member, Jared. He decided that he didn't like any of the tiers that I had. I have a $2, a $5, a $10, and a $20 tier. He decided he wanted to just make his own tier up. I didn't even know that was possible. So shout out to Jared for making that possible and joining us on our Patreon. My Patreon is growing. Hopefully when we do our canyon calls, that'll be growing too, and we'll get more people on those calls. They're kind of fun. We just sit and chat about canyons for a while. It's kind of awesome to get to know the people that are helping me support the show. Also on Patreon, that's the only place that I post who I'm going to have upcoming interviews with. So if you want an opportunity to be able to ask questions of guests that I have coming up, that's the only place that you'll be able to do that. So this podcast is totally run by me, myself, and the editing and research to do these stories takes a little bit of my time. So if you are interested, if these stories have impacted your life at all, any type of donation is welcome. Also, if you would like to support the show by just getting yourself a beer glass or some stickers, those are available on my website, thecanyonsarecalling.com. I know I need to do some work on that. It's not my favorite part. So I honestly haven't updated that in a couple of episodes, so I need to work on that. But I do have beer glasses, stickers, and the dog tug toys. Those are really fun for the dogs. They love them. So I haven't met a dog yet that hasn't liked my tug toy. So just throwing that out there. If you love your dog, get him a tug toy. Anyway, enough of me rambling on. I don't really have much to say today. I do have Rich Carlson on for the interview. When I asked him if there was anything else and made sure that we touched all of our bases, he mentioned that I did not cover his newest project. So I'm going to be talking to him again on Thursday, and then I'll be throwing a part 2 to this episode out next week. So in the meantime, we're going to find out more about canyons and crags, the totem, and why Rich moved to Mexico. Enjoy. Okay, so today joining us, we have Rich Carlson, who just relocated down to Mexico. How you doing, Rich?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm really good.
Good.
So first question, what brought you to Mexico?
A woman.
Nice. Lucky lady.
I've been coming here about 20 years training guides. And actually before that, I did a little bit of guiding in Copper Canyon back in the 90s. But my decision to stay here permanently was for a woman.
Very nice. So that was the next question I had a person want to know is what part of Mexico are you in, and are there a lot of canyons there?
I'm currently in El Cercado, Santiago, which is about a half hour south of Monterrey. And probably some of the best canyons in all of Mexico are very close to me here.
Very nice. For me, that would be an important reason why I move. Aside from love, it would have to have canyons too.
Yeah, I think when people think of canyons in Mexico, they think of Maricanes and Chipatin. And the road to those two canyons is about a block away from me.
Oh, very nice.
They're very close.
Awesome. So are you still teaching classes down there?
I teach here, and I still go back to the U.S. every couple of months and offer classes back there. Things have been kind of screwy since COVID, though. I used to travel all over the world teaching, and right now it's U.S., Mexico, back and forth.
Yeah, COVID has definitely made international travel a lot more difficult. For sure. All right. Well, people wanted to have you on to talk about the canyons and crags. I know for me personally, your YouTube videos have been a ton of information and a lot of training. And I've never actually taken a course from you. I know a lot of my friends have, and I recommend them to people that are getting into the sport. But can you just tell us a little bit about how you got into the sport and then how that got started?
Well, I think like most people, I got into it because I was working as a traveling salesman.
Wow.
That's I meant that as a joke, but it's actually true. When I got out of the Army back in 1976, I took a job selling amusements like vending machines, foosball tables.
Hmm.
I was selling the original Pong and Space Invaders. The company was out of Orlando, Florida, but I lived in Denver at the time. And I could call the company and say, "Hey, I've never been to Oregon." And they'd give me leads, and I go talk to people in Oregon. So I spent a lot of time living on the road and driving around. And one of the trips I was making on a regular basis was between Denver and Salt Lake City. And just looking out at the landscape was pretty appealing. So one day I decided I was going to drive out there and poke around, and drove as far as I could down a little dirt road with my car, and then got out and started walking around. And I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary Gorgon, but he asked me the same question in there. I dropped into a canyon not knowing what I was facing, and I actually thought I was going to die in that canyon. I tried really hard to get back out. I'd gone farther down, and there was a place I couldn't pass any farther, so I turned around and thought I could climb everything that I down climbed and slid down, but that wasn't the case. So I can admit it now. I sat down and cried for a while.
Hmm.
And finally, what got me out is what I now call bridging, but I pushed my legs up against one wall and my hands on the other, and got up high enough to where I could start rock climbing, and got out and swore I'd come back someday with a rope. And I did get back to Utah with rope, but never found that same canyon again. So
Is the stretch of highway you're talking about on I-70 where this well is?
yeah,
Okay. It's such a beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
stretch of land.
yeah, for sure. Feels like you were on Mars or something if you hadn't been there before.
Yeah, it's definitely otherworldly. I grew up in that area, and for some reason, I still have not been there. Like,
Oh,
it came up on my Facebook memories that 10 years ago, I finally got my Steve Allen book, which was my very first canyoneering book.
oh yeah.
And it was for the canyoneering in the swell. And I still haven't been there. Like, I need to make that happen this spring.
You're missing a lot.
Yeah, I hear it's amazing.
Yeah.
This little area here, like, I mean, we just have so much. And then when I travel, it's, you know, to like North Wash or Ouray or Arizona.
Yeah, all those exotic places.
There's so many places.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's nice to have a lot in your backyard.
Yeah.
So what was the next step after you almost died in that canyon and you decided you needed some more training?
There was no training available back then. This would have been like 1977 that I first started seeing canyons out there. I never got any formal training with ropes again until probably mid 80s, late 80s, something like that. My first time on rope was actually in 1974 in basic training in the Army, but that was just a very large drill sergeant telling me to get the hell off of his rappelling wall. So we rappelled one time. There was no instruction with it. It was just, rig the rope and get the hell off the wall kind of a thing. But
So you just kind of taught yourself how to get through the canyons and how to get back up?
yeah, I went to high school in Boulder, Colorado, and I had some friends back then that were into rock climbing.
Okay.
So I dabbled in it a little bit when I lived in Boulder, but I look back on it and we were just dumb kids that were doing a lot of things wrong and lucky not to die. So, but I think the same of canyoneers now. God loves canyoneers. If he didn't love us so much, a lot more of us would be dying for the stupid things we do.
I agree. That's kind of why I want to get these stories out there, so we're thinking more safely while we are exploring, for sure.
Yeah.
So when did you start the Canyons and Crags?
When I moved to Cedar City, Utah in 2002.
Okay. Was the ACA that formed way before that, right?
Not way before. I think officially the ACA was 2000.
Okay.
In either 98 or 99, I bought the domain name canyoneering.net and just put it up and asked the question, should there be an association? And if so, what should it do? And kind of a shot in the arm for the ACA back then is in 1999, there was a canyoning accident in Interlaken, Switzerland. 22 people died in one flash flood. And so people got on the internet, news people, the media, looking for more information about this sport. And they found that little one page canyoneering.net webpage and started contacting me. And I ended up being interviewed by the BBC and ABC News and NPR and so on. And they started asking, well, what's this association all about? And I said, well, I don't know yet. Stay tuned. So it kind of took off from there.
Okay. Back to canyons and crags.
Okay.
Once you moved to Cedar City, how did that get developed?
Say that again.
How did canyons and crags get developed after you moved to Cedar City? What did that look like?
Well, I started initially just to be a guide service. I wasn't intending it to sell any gear or anything like that, but there was another retail store in Cedar City at the time that went out of business, and somebody said, "Hey, Rich, this is a perfect opportunity for you. There's now a Petzl dealership and a Black Diamond dealership, and so on, available here in Cedar City." And I thought, "Oh, what the heck?" So I found a retail space that I rented, had it for about that first space, I think maybe 6 years, and hated retail. I hated it so bad. I did not want to be sitting in a store all the time. So it was pretty common for me to come back from a trip and there'd be a sign on the door, notes from customers saying, "What kind of store is this? You're never here."
You're never open. You're always on adventures.
No, I'd be in Nepal or Hong Kong or Taiwan or someplace teaching. And so I finally decided this was stupid, and I closed down the retail store. I I moved everything I had into just a storage space, and that's all it was going to be, is storage. But there was a day I was teaching a guides class in Cedar City, and we got hit with a lot of rain. So to kind of save the day, I said, "Well, I got this warehouse we could hang off of some rafters." So I got in there with the students. We hang some ropes to practice ascending and some rigging and things like that. And they looked around and said, "This is actually kind of a nice space. It's got tall ceilings. You ought to do something with it." And that group of guys, during that class, every night I would buy construction materials. And after class, they'd come back to the space and help me frame it and put up insulation. And we put drywall on the walls and, so on, and turn it into a pretty nice space, which I had until January of this year.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
And then you started teaching out of that warehouse, right?
Yeah. Built a big metal structure that people could hang on, and ended up going back into retail, but I only sold to students. I do have an online store, but retail is just not my thing. I consider myself primarily an instructor who dabbles in retail.
So what do your courses entail?
Well, it depends on the course. I teach everything from beginning canyoneering all the way up to professional guides. I train rescue teams. So now I'm training people who train guides.
Very nice.
Which, well, it's nice, but at the same time, it feels like I'm training a lot of my competition.
I could see that.
There was a time when I first started teaching that if I put a course on the calendar, people would come literally from all over the world to take a course. Now in Cedar City, people say, "Well, yeah, but do I really want to drive all the way from Salt Lake or Las Vegas when there's other instructors?" So it's become a lot more competitive.
That's very true. There are a lot more out there.
And there's a lot of guys out there that are better businessmen than me, better marketing than me, and so on. So
yeah,
but I still love it.
Well, that's great. And are you still making online videos, or?
I have not made a new video in quite some time. Life just kind of gets in the way most of the time. I say I'm going to start doing, and then I have to do something else, or I get sidetracked and so on. But right now, here close to where I live, I found a space that if the owner will get back to me, it's a space I want to rent and set up as nothing but a studio and get back at it. I brought all my production gear down here with me. I've got my cameras and my lights and my microphones and everything. So
Very nice. You
if
already have, how many videos do you have on YouTube right now?
I think there's something like 25.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
Very, very educational.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate them.
You want to hear the story of how that got started?
Yeah, for sure.
So in 2016, I resigned from the ACA, and a friend that I knew at the time named Luca Cherubini contacted me. And he said, Rich, what are you going to do now? And I says, I'm done with canyoneering. I'm done with the politics. I'm going to find something completely different. And Luca knew me well enough. He said, oh, bullshit. You're not going to stop teaching canyoneering. And I gave him the same whining I just gave you, that it's so competitive that it's hard to get people to travel. And he said, yeah, but Rich, if you did something online, people could enjoy your training no matter where they are. So I said, well, yeah, but the problem is I would have to give up work and focus on nothing but videos. So Lucas said, I tell you what, if you'll focus on videos, I will support you financially for a while. So I kind of put it out there, and he and a few other people were kicking in money every month. It wasn't on Patreon, but it was something similar to that.
Mhm.
And it put me in a position where, sure enough, I was free to put out videos, and I was putting out one maybe every couple of weeks, something like that. But unfortunately, Luca passed away in a swiftwater accident, and I got kind of depressed about it for a while, and what was left over from the other supporters wasn't enough for me to stop working, so I had to go back to work and start teaching some more and so on. So, but if it wasn't for Luca, I never would have started the channel.
That's awesome. He had a huge impact on the canyoneering community while he was here.
He started as my student back in, I think, 2003. He took several courses from me, and one day he said, Rich, you've changed my life. I'm going to reorganize everything so I can do nothing but travel the world and do canyons. And
Wow.
I said, yeah, yeah, whatever. Sounds nice. But he actually did. And one day I got a package in the mail from Amazon, and I opened it. It was a book called The 4-Hour Work Week. And I thought, oh, this is a mistake. I would not have ordered this. So I was packaging it back up to send it back. And then I noticed there was a little note on the packing list that said it was a gift from Luca Cherubini. So I contacted him. I said, what's this all about? He says, Rich, you work too much. You need to read this book and restructure your life.
Yeah.
So I've never been as good at it as Luca was, but
I've heard great things about that book. Maybe I should read it.
it is definitely worth reading.
Yeah. Very cool.
Not as easy to implement all the advice, but it's great advice.
Yeah, for sure. If we could all just do what we love all the time.
Yeah.
That'd be great. I think the whole society would be more happy.
Oh, yeah. We need to become less materialistic, if nothing else.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that. Well, awesome. So what are some of your favorite canyons?
Oh, this is the question I hate more than any other question. I hate it because canyons are cool and they're diverse. So if you've never done any canyons except in the Colorado Plateau, you'd have to pick your favorite Colorado Plateau canyon. But if you've done nothing but canyons in, for example, France, you'd have to name your favorite canyon in France. And what makes one canyon an amazing canyon might be completely different than what makes another canyon, an awesome canyon. But I'm at the point now where I look at canyons, not so much with the canyons, but what the experience was like. And there's a couple canyons I did in Iran that were not the most appealing canyons in the world that I've ever done, but just the experience and the people that I was with and the fact that I was in frickin' Iran just made it really cool. So,
Yeah,
but
that's a great answer.
if I were if I were sitting down and being realistic and objective, I'd have to remember all the sheep shit that was in that canyon. There was a lot of it. I mean, there were things about it that should have made it unappealing, but still, just the memories were pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, I can't answer that one either because it's a lot of the people you were with, the temperature that day, the
Yeah, yeah,
flow or not flow of the water. I mean, there's so much that goes into it.
yeah.
What is your maybe favorite like type of canyon?
So I mean, you have to love Southern Utah. I mean, that sculptured red sandstone is pretty amazing. But I've also done canyons in the Blue Mountains of Australia, and I swear they're almost identical. The Blue Mountains of Australia is also a sculptured sandstone, but we look around in Utah and we see juniper and pinyon pine and so on. What you see in the Blue Mountains canyons are a lot of eucalyptus trees. And instead of seeing dead deer in the canyons, you see dead kangaroos in the canyons and so on. But my overall favorite canyons are usually limestone. And it's the type of canyons that we have here in northern Mexico. They're limestone canyons. Um, like the most popular one here is called Matacanes. It goes underground twice. It's got waterfalls and jumps, and there's a spot in there that feels like this grotto with ferns and moss growing all around you and so on. And I've done a lot of other limestone canyons in Spain and France and Italy as well that were gorgeous.
Yeah,
But
those canyons look amazing.
the water's clear, and when the sun is just right, it kind of looks like a turquoise color to the water.
Yeah,
So they are gorgeous.
I can't wait to see that in person.
Yeah.
It sounds incredible.
Well, when are you going to come visit?
What are their COVID protocols right now?
It's actually more challenging for me to go from Mexico to the U.S. than it is to come back to Mexico. To go to the U.S., I have to get a negative COVID test, which you can do right in the airport here in Monterey. But to come back, there's nothing. There's
Is it like drivable?
In Mexico or to Mexico?
To there, like from here. Would that
you live in Kanab, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a long drive, but it's easy to cross the border.
Yeah, I'll have to look into it. What's the best time of year to go there?
Not right now.
You were saying it's a little cold there.
It's a little chilly right now, but anytime from the spring to the fall.
Okay.
The weather's nice enough that, I mean, you don't have to narrow it down to a month or two like you would have to in the Pacific Northwest. Down here, I would say anytime from March to October.
Okay.
Big window.
Yeah, that is nice. I'm assuming they're Class C canyons.
They are Class C canyons.
Okay. Nice. Do you have any canyons you would not repeat again?
That I would not repeat again?
Yeah.
I think it's I got to come back to the same kind of answer depending on the experience. There were times when I was guiding where something miserable would happen. And as we're exiting the canyon and going back to the cars, we're looking at each other saying, I am never, ever, ever going to do this blankety blank canyon again. And then a few months go by and somebody calls you on the phone and says, hey, you want to go do such and such? Yeah, what the hell? Let's go. So there's a canyon in Arizona. What's it called? The highlight of the canyon is a place called Five Pools. I think it's called Devil's Canyon. And I've done it, I think, twice. And we did an Arizona rendezvous years ago, And a couple friends from Mexico showed up while I was out doing a different canyon. I came back and I said, where's Chewy and Ruben? And they said, oh, they went to do Devil's Canyon. I said, why? And they said, oh, they heard from somebody that's a really nice canyon. So we had dinner, a couple hours go by, Chewy and Ruben still aren't back. And somebody says, when do you think Ruben and Chewy are going to come back? And I said, well, if they're out there by themselves, they'll probably be back in the morning.
Oh no.
So, because there's some route finding issues and, so on. So sure enough, they didn't get back until the next morning. And they came to me and they said, Rich, where could we have gotten better beta for this canyon? And I said, at the time anyway, better beta didn't exist. You're just crazy to go there unless you're going with somebody that's been there before. So, and Arizona has all kinds of vegetation that wants to reach out and grab you and hold you in place. And so they encountered a lot of that. But that's one. I probably would never go back and do it again.
Add that to the don't do list.
Yeah. Unless you're with somebody that's been there and knows how to avoid all the treachery.
Yeah, that's smart. All right. Any other canyon stories you want to talk about?
Oh, I could go on and on and on with canyon stories, and I imagine you're not doing like a 12-hour podcast.
I try to keep them to about an hour, but sometimes they go over.
Yeah.
Oh, we haven't touched the totem yet. Let's talk about the totem.
Okay. What would you like to know about the totem?
Why did you design the totem? And I know it has a million uses. Maybe talk about a few of the uses.
Okay. It came about because when the ACA first started, I also started the first canyoneering forum on the internet called the Canyons Group. And what people did is argued about the best device. Is it an ATC or is it a figure eight? That's all we had to argue about, other than an oddball caver coming on once in a while talking about using a rappel rack. And there were pros and cons to ATCs and figure eights, but I was more of a figure eight fan because there was a lot more ways I could rig it and so on. But in the old days as a climbing guide, I also used to use this thing called the Kong GG, which is kind of a predecessor to the Petzl Reverso or the Black Diamond ATC guide. I could use it to belay two rock climbers, coming up behind me. And there was another device that came out. A friend of mine used to work for Trango, and Trango came out with a product called the Magic. And it kind of looked like a skinny figure eight on one end and a Kong GG on the other end. But it was really skinny, and if you took it through any sandstone canyon, you'd burn through it in one canyon. So I started looking at it and thought, well, what if we took a full figure eight, a full thickness figure eight, and on the end put a full GG on it? So the first prototype I made out of wood, and just to make sure the rope would fit in it, and so on and so on. And it took it to Rock Exotica and asked them if they would make prototypes. So they made 4 prototypes. I gave 3 of them to friends, and we'd spend days out there just playing with them, seeing what we could do with them. And that was about the time the Petzl Piranha came out. And it was the first device we'd seen that had that little rubber gasket in it. So we went back for the second round of prototypes and asked Rock Exotica to do one of them with a round hole in it. And everybody hated it. They liked the idea of having the oval hole that you could put 2 carabiners in, and you had a lot more versatility and so on. So between me and some friends, we came up with maybe 5 or 6 things you could do with the totem. But even then I thought I'd have a hard time just holding this up and say, hey, give me $40. So what I did is I sold them through totem workshops. A full day workshop was $95, and it included a totem. And in the very first workshop, students were coming up with new ideas. So the next workshop I taught, I had the ideas from me and my friends, plus the ideas from the first class. So now I'm teaching maybe a dozen ways to use it. And the second class came up with even more. And it just kept going and going and going. And it got to the point where I couldn't remember all the uses anymore.
Wow.
I'm back to looking at it as um, it's cool that you can do so many things with it, but there's about 6 things that are really, really cool. And the rest of them become kind of esoteric.
Yeah. I know Nick Smith uses one where he can like the brake throttle mode, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool. And then I've seen people rig the Joker and Gesture modes in
Yeah.
canyons, which now that I have one, I need to learn how to use those.
Well, you like the gesture the most. There's things you can do with the gesture that are really cool. There's another guy that's got a video that I stumbled upon by accident, but it's called the Pop and Lock. And I looked at what he was doing. I thought, oh my God. I mean, it's another guy that came up with uses for the totem. And the other thing that's happened with the totem is it's become kind of a cult. And that might sound strange, but a woman in Utah came to me once and she said, would you be okay with me getting a tattoo of the totem logo? I thought, well, why would you want to do that? And she said, it's a cool logo. So sure enough, she got this totem logo. I think it was on her forearm. And then right now, I can tell you there's at least 6 people that have totem tattoos.
Oh,
There's a artist in Guadalajara, Mexico, that uses the totem in a lot of his graphic art, and he's come up with all kinds of T-shirt designs and so on and so on. And it's just, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's like a device plus it's a piece of art in a lot of people's mind. So,
oh, that's awesome.
can I plug the website?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, there is a website, totemrigging.com. And I've kind of divided it into 2 parts. There's the technical rigging part of it, and then there's the cult of totem part of it. And you'll see on there, people have made gingerbread in the shape of a totem. They've designed jewelry as totems, and it's kind of crazy.
Earrings and bracelets. That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So totemrigging.com.
Totemrigging.com, correct.
I'll have to check that out. Cool. All right. And also, how about the VT Pressic? You designed that too. And I know a lot of people are huge fans of that for the auto block.
The VT Prusik started because years ago we were doing this thing we called a Valdetan. We would take a piece of like 2-meter retired dynamic rock climbing rope and pull 2 of the core strands completely out of it to make it kind of mushy. And then we would tie an overhand knot in either end to do things like tie the Valdetan truss. The problem with it is because you're using a nylon cord on a nylon or polyester host rope, friction was an issue. So we could only use the Valdetan truss or the Valdetan in wet canyons. So one day I was in Blue Water's booth at the Outdoor Retailer show up in Salt Lake City, and they had a rope hanging there. Then I felt it, and it was mushy like our Valdetans. Well, they told me it was a rope that they were making for firemen to bail out of burning buildings because the sheath was made out of Technora. It doesn't melt, but it starts to char at about 950 degrees. So I asked them if they'd be willing to make a commercial product for me by sewing eyes on either end of a piece about 30 inches long. And they thought I was crazy, but they said, sure, we'll give it a try. And I'd already been working with them on the development of the first canyoneering ropes in the US, the original Canyon Pro. And it was pretty successful at the time, so that they said they'd give it a shot. And the success of the VT has been crazy. They're selling like thousands of them. And one of the biggest things I got going for me is there's a company in Uray called Rigging for Rescue that does rescue training. And they decided they liked it and started doing a bunch of testing, pull testing, drop testing, and so on. And so it got to the point where I'd get an order from far away places, from crazy groups like Navy SEALs and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and so on. And as soon as they'd call me and want to order 50 of them, it's like, let me guess, you just got some rescue training from Rigging for Rescue in Uray. Yeah, as a matter of fact. So that was
That's
a big
really neat.
yarn. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I know. I have a couple of them. Just ordered
Yeah.
a couple more while I could.
Yeah. It's been a little challenging since COVID because of shipping issues. And there's been a Technora shortage, but those problems are kind of working themselves out, and we're getting quite a few back in stock again. It is a very versatile tool.
Mm-hmm. I like basically for self-rescuing and things like that. If someone gets stuck on rope, you can use it.
Yeah.
As well as the third hand if you have an issue while rappelling.
Yeah.
So,
If I compare the totem and the VT Prusik, the thing with the totem is it's a rigging and rappelling device. And for whatever reason, people are very opinionated about their favorites. So somebody will come on the internet and say, what is the best rappelling device? They will not get an objective answer. They'll get a bunch of people's opinions. But if somebody comes on and asks a question about a VT Prusik, it is almost 100% unanimous. Yes, you should have a VT Prusik.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as rappel devices go, I feel like as long as you know what works for you,
sure.
To each their own. Because body weight makes a difference. The type of canyon you're doing makes a difference. The type of rope you use makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Tom's gonna hate me right now, but my favorite rappel device is now the Hoodoo. I really like it. For me, it works perfect in canyon mode. I rarely have to go over the arm, but when I do, it adds just enough friction.
Yeah.
I haven't used it in a wet canyon yet, but I really like it.
I had a guy in a course in Las Vegas a few weeks ago that is the designer of the he's going to hate me too because I'm going to say Pikachu, but that's not right.
Oh, Pelicoa.
It's something pivot.
The Pelicoa pivot.
Okay, the Pelicoa.
Yeah.
Not the Pikachu pivot.
Not the Pikachu.
Okay. I look at devices now and I started using really simple things like figure eights, and we didn't kill ourselves. We didn't need horns. We didn't need all of this stuff. So some of the times I look at these devices with all the horns and I think, man, that is ridiculous. But people can look at the totem and say, well, why did you need all that? Why not just stick to a basic figure eight?
Yeah.
But we let this guy demonstrate his pivot to the entire class. And it was actually pretty cool. There was some different ways you could rig it, using different holes that you clip in and so on. So innovation.
Basically, when I need to play with it in the pivot mode a little bit more than I have. I did use it in the basic mode a couple times.
Yeah. Well, basically what he's doing is if you run it straight, it would compare to something like a critter or a hoodoo.
Yeah.
When you put it in the pivot mode, it's more like a squirrel.
Yeah. And I feel like maybe my issue with trying it in pivot mode is I had an accident on the squirrel.
Okay.
So I wasn't able to add friction on the fly. And in my defense, I didn't practice it beforehand like I normally do on a smaller rappel.
Right.
And so I was on 100-foot rappel when I was going too fast and tried to add friction. And I hadn't practiced with it. So it was my fault that it happened.
I understand.
But when you fall 30 feet and you have blisters on your whole hand and, it just kind of jars you for a minute.
Yeah.
I sold my squirrels to a friend of mine. I traded him for a kayak. Thanks, Wes. But yeah, so I think about using the pivot in pivot mode, but then I'm like, no, I need to do it on a canyon that I've done before and just practice with it before.
Several years ago, there were back-to-back accidents on the entry rappel to Engelstead Canyon. And I say several years ago, it was about the time the Canyon Pro came out. And it was the first time people started thinking about using skinny ropes, like an 8mm rope. And these back-to-back accidents all had some of the same things in common. It was a single strand of 8mm rope. People were using ATCs. The guy on rappel was not tiny. It was 200-pound plus, and so on. So it hit the internet forums, and somebody would come on and say, well, the reason that for that accident is 8mm rope should be illegal. And then somebody else came on and said double strand rope should be required on all rappels. Somebody else said you should use an auto block 100% of the time. Somebody else said ATCs should be illegal in canyons, and so on and so on. And it went around and around in circles like canyoneers like to argue and so on. But in the end, what really caused it is somebody tried a new combination of gear and rope and so on, and they should not have done it on a 300-foot rappel.
100%.
Anything that you do that you tweak your even one variable in your system, you should try it on a 45-degree slope with a pile of mattresses under you, or on belay or something, so you don't pay a big price if the variables surprise you.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, we just had a birthday party for the podcast, and Black Glacier donated a bunch of Pelicoas.
okay.
So a couple of my Kanab friends were like, we need to go to the Huntress and practice this in pivot mode. And she was coming up with some creative ways to rig it too. And I was like, yep, let's go to the Huntress, because there you do have those itty bitty rappels that are 45-degree angle that you can practice whatever you want. And if you fall, it's not going to be a catastrophe.
Yeah, or do it on a top rope belay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that too.
Yeah,
for sure. I know a lot of people like to practice down climbing skills, and doing that on a top rope belay for me is like key. If you slip, like,
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's fun to practice, but
yeah,
maybe I'm too safe about it.
there's no such thing as too safe.
I agree. Yeah.
Canyoneer is an amazing sport, but life is precious.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so fun, but the risks that we take are safe when you're safe about it. But when you start getting like complacent and not worrying about things and jumping around, people jumping is scary.
For sure. For sure.
Anyway, we've been chatting for a little while. Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Oh, can you explain the meaning of life and the origins of the universe?
Well, those I think vary from person to person. But I think the meaning is the goal is just, have as much fun as you can while you're here without hurting people.
Yeah, I think we're here to learn and to serve.
Yeah, that's good. Good point.
Yeah.
For sure. Too much take.
Yeah.
More people need to give back.
For sure.
Anyway, canyoneering makes me super hungry. I don't know about you.
Is this where you asked me about my favorite snack in a canyon?
Yes. What's your favorite canyon snack?
I don't think I have a favorite snack. If I'm throwing stuff into a dry bag or my dry keg, it's probably going to be some granola bar that was at the store this morning.
While you're getting gas.
Yeah, I'm not terribly loyal to any brand or type of granola bars. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't have a favorite per se.
Awesome.
But I will say I'm always jealous of the people that come more prepared than me. I'll throw a lazy snack in my dry bag, and then I'll get down the canyon and somebody pull out some Tupperware, and they'll start putting a salad together, or pulling out their submarine sandwich or something. I get jealous.
This girl had a beautiful wrap the other day. It was like carrots and beets and cabbage and stuff, but it was so pretty with all the colors of vegetables. I'm like, I should get more creative like that.
Yeah.
I had some granola. That's about
it. I think part of it for me is, back in my guiding days, I always spoiled clients. So, we'd find a place where I would lay out a tablecloth on a rock and then pull out a stove, and I'd make hot water for tea, and then I'd pull out all the fixings for sandwiches and things. And
oh, wow.
Now that I'm not responsible for clients like that anymore, I gotten lazy.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
That sounds like an awesome guide experience, though.
It made for a lot of repeat clients.
Yeah. I was too lazy to bring a table and a stove. I was like,
Didn't
here's your
bring,
sandwich.
I didn't bring a table. I brought a tablecloth.
Tablecloth, that's what I meant.
Yeah, one of those red and white checkered plastic things you put on a picnic table.
Nice. Make it legit.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How about after canyons? What is your favorite after canyon beverage?
Well, that's going to be beer.
Yes.
There's a microbrewery, conveniently located. That would be choice number one.
Are you a beer snob like I am? I only like IPAs, but some people like lagers or
So
Budweiser.
I think I'm a beer snob, but I hate IPAs.
See, that's my husband. It's so weird.
I don't like that bitter aftertaste.
Yeah.
But I do I like reds and ambers are usually my favorites. Years ago, when I was running all of the rendezvous in the United States, word got out that I liked Negro Modelo. And Negro Modelo started showing up in the strangest places. I would come back from a canyon to the trailhead, and there'd be a 24-pack sitting on the hood of my truck.
Huh.
Or I would come home and there'd be a case of it sitting on the porch of my house.
That's interesting. Do
Yeah.
you like that type of beer, or was it just
Oh no, I still do. Negro Modelo was my favorite for a long
your
time.
favorite? Very cool.
Yeah, it still kind of is, and here I am living in Mexico, and I don't see it that often.
Interesting.
So, Modelo is here, but it's usually Modelo Especial.
Yeah.
Finding Negro Modelo is a little hard to come by.
Interesting. We'll bring some when we come visit.
Negro Modelo. But it'll seem a little odd bringing Mexican beer to Mexico.
Probably, but you know.
It's here. It's just, like if you're in a restaurant, I forget the two families of beer here. There's and Heineken and Budweiser own the two biggest breweries in Mexico now. But I think one is Tecate and the other one is whatever the other one is. So when you go to a restaurant, they only have that family of beer.
Right.
So my wife really likes Corona. But sometimes we'll go to a restaurant and she'll ask for a Corona and they say, no, we don't have Corona. We have the other family of beer. And then she'll know to order an Indio or whatever. So
Interesting. If you could go anywhere in the world once COVID travel is available again, where would you go and why?
Well, I'm actually going to give you two answers.
Okay.
One answer is Nepal. I used to go there at least once a year, usually twice a year, volunteering to train guides. And I miss doing that. But the one destination that I promised people I would come back, and it's now been almost 10 years and I haven't been back, and that's Iran.
Okay.
Of all the places I've been in this world, the people in Iran are the dearest to my heart. And
That's
maybe
good
in
to
part
hear.
because it might be in part because we have a misconception. I didn't think much about it. I had to fly from Istanbul to Tehran, and I didn't really think about it until they announced on the plane we're making our final descent into Tehran. And then there was a part of me that's saying, oh my God, what if I land and terrorists take me hostage or something? But my experience was completely opposite of that. I had an absolute blast when I was there.
Do you feel like maybe it's how just Americans politicize
Yes,
what's
it's
going on over there?
and not just Americans. It's our bullshit government.
Right.
No
Yeah.
matter, it doesn't matter which party is in power. It's just
Mm-mm.
our government, their government, governments in general suck.
Yeah.
But if they would just leave us alone and let the people of the United States meet the people of Iran, we would all fall in love with each other and have a great time.
Yeah.
So the canyon I was telling you about that had the sheep shit in it,
Mm-hmm.
um, There, two of the guys that were with us had done the canyon before, and they said this is a canyon that's going to take. I think it took the two of them like 7 or 8 hours. So I'm thinking, okay, we got a group of like 14 or 15. We need to haul ass down this canyon. So we were as efficient as we could at every drop. And we get to the top of one, and I look down, and there's a crowd of men gathered below, men in their 20s and 30s and so on. And I looked to my group, and they said, we're at the last rappel, which, I mean, we did the whole canyon with 15 people in maybe 4 hours. But now I'm looking at what could have been a group of terrorists waiting to grab the American and take him hostage and so on. But instead, it was some people that heard there was an American in the canyon, and they wanted to meet me. So they started a fire, and they were making hot tea for us to warm us up when we got out of the canyon. And
Oh,
then
wow.
over the next couple hours, I got my picture taken with all of my new friends. So it was a cool experience. The same thing in restaurants. The owner of restaurants would come out once he found out there was an American in his restaurant. And first he would apologize that he couldn't serve me wine or beer. And then he wanted his picture taken with his new American friend.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah. It was a great experience.
Very cool. I've also had some other people talk about Iran canyons. So
Yeah.
it was
The
awesome.
gorgeous place. There's a very big outdoor community there. They're into mountaineering, canyoning, and caving. And they've got some gorgeous places to do it.
Awesome. To put that higher on my list, I suppose. For sure.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance, don't turn it down.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have any safety advice that you would like to leave our listeners with before we say goodbye?
I guess a couple things. One we kind of already talked about, not taking a risk when you try something new. And even if you've been doing something 1,000 times, but this is the first time you've done it on a skinnier rope, or the first time you've done it with a new device or whatever, practice it someplace safe. And then the other couple things I'd throw out is there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Have you heard of it?
I don't know.
It's basically a graph, and the graph peaks very early at what's called the peak of ignorance.
Okay.
And then it drops into the valley of humility, and then it starts coming back up again. And what it relates to is our perception of our own competence. So the peak of ignorance is we started a sport, and our first few experiences were with somebody who's more experienced than us. So maybe they've done 10 canyons, 50 canyons, or whatever. And we look at it and we see, okay, they tied a piece of webbing around a tree. They ran the rope through a ring and threw the two ends down, and we rappelled. Wow, that's simple. I can do that. So they now believe they know everything they need to know about canyoneering. So they are at the peak of ignorance. They drop into the valley of humility because something goes wrong. And they realize, oh my God, I didn't realize that if a rope gets stuck, somebody has to ascend to unstick it. Never occurred to me I needed to learn how to ascend. Or they have a friend that's stuck on the rope. Oh my God, it never occurred to me that I might have to deal with this kind of an emergency. So they went from the peak of ignorance, dropping down into that valley of humility, and they start coming back up the other side when they start being more humble and realizing they don't know everything there is to know, and they open their minds to learning new things. The other category would be getting on the internet and looking up something called heuristic traps. It's spelled Heuristic. What you will find on the internet are articles related to avalanche accidents. It was somebody that was looking at avalanche accidents, talking to survivors, and he noticed that a lot of people said, I knew we shouldn't have done it, but we did it anyway. And then he started looking at their answers and putting them into categories. And I see the exact same thing happen in canyoneering a lot. People will say things like, well, that webbing looked bad, but we've used webbing that looked that bad before and nothing went wrong. And then the webbing breaks.
Yeah.
Or that knot doesn't look right, but my partner said it's okay. And my partner's got more experience than me. So there's little things, little rules of thumb that we use that help us make faster decisions, but not necessarily good decisions.
That's well said. Remember one time in my canyoneering career, guy goes down the rope and he was the first one down, but he was kind of a newbie. And he was like, there's a core shot in this rope. And our friend's like, you don't know what a core shot looks like. Whatever, you're full of shit. What, you know? And we pull up the rope, and sure enough, something had happened, and there was a core shot in that. And so I'm glad that we were like, no, we need to at least look at what he's talking about. He might be new, but he saw something weird.
Yeah.
You know? And we pulled it up and looked, and yeah, sure enough. That's why we bring way extra ropes, because we had another one we were still able to get through.
There was an incident on a trip. It was the Southern Utah University's outdoor club. They were on a canyoneering trip, and an 18-year-old girl looked at the guy rigging the rope. He was setting up a static block. And she said, you know, I've been on the internet and I was reading about something called releasable contingencies. And the guy looked her in the eye. This is the qualified leader of the outing. He looked her in the eye and said, look at the size of this group. I don't have time to mess around with that fancy rigging. So she gets on rappel, and she had her hair tied back in a ponytail. But as she was going over the edge, somebody said something to her. She turned her head quickly, and her ponytail came around to the front and got wrapped up in her rappelling device. Well, she's thinking, you know, I'm with this competent leader. Certainly he knows how to deal with the situation. But he had no clue. So he lowered a knife to her on a string so she could cut her hair.
Oh, man.
So there's a photo floating around with this big clump of ponytail stuck in this rappelling device. And that's where it came from, is from that situation. So, and I bump into a lot of people, and it includes quite a few women who have met some guy, and I'm sure the conversation goes something like, hey, baby, you can trust me. I've done 100 canyons, and I'm crazy competent. And she trusts the guy, and next thing you know, she's got her hair stuck in a rappelling device. He told me he's competent, but now that I've got a problem, he has no idea how to deal with it. And too often it involves lowering a knife on a string for somebody to cut their hair while they're hanging on a tension rope.
Yeah.
So
I heard a story just the same. Like they were even on a blind date or something, and she never even called him back because he made her cut her hair. And I'm like, and had you just rigged a little bit differently, it doesn't take any more time to rig a contingency as it does to rig a static block, in my opinion. And then you can just lower somebody, and
even if it takes an extra 30 seconds, it's worth doing.
It's worth it. Yeah, especially when somebody gets stuck, because it takes way longer to undo the static block to lower somebody. Or if you don't have enough rope, that's my biggest thing.
Yeah. You know, as long as I'm thinking about it, the other thing I'll throw at you is there's rigging out there that should be considered expert rigging, not for beginners. And the problem is, because canyoneering is growing up with the internet, a lot of people see things on the internet and they see, oh, this is what the cool kids are doing. This is how I should do it. And a lot of those techniques really are cool. And one of them I'm thinking of is the toggle kind of a thing, like the fiddle stick or the smooth operator, you know, that kind of toggle thing. Those are cool techniques, and they have a purpose. But if a team's going to be using them, everybody on that team needs to know how to self-rescue. Because you can't rig a releasable contingency, you know, on toggle. So if you're a beginner and you're asking me if you should be using a toggle, my answer is no. And it's not because I can't teach you how to use a toggle. They're not that difficult to set up. It's because if something goes wrong and it's you, do you know how to self-rescue? If it's your partner, do they know how to self-rescue? And if they don't, what is your plan? Well, you better
Right.
have another rope that you can use to do a pick off or something. But too often, the same cool kids are saying, well, we can do the toggle with an 8 millimeter rope and we can use a 3 millimeter M Steel Blue Dyneema pull cord. Well, there's no contingency for problems.
Mm-mm.
So that's an expert plan. That's not a beginner plan.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And that little Dyneema rope scares me. Tom uses it a lot, and like it's fine if you have a lot of rope extra, but if that's going to be your backup plan, like that's not going to work at all.
Dyneema is never a backup plan for a lot
No.
of reasons.
Yeah.
It's slippery. It won't hold a knot.
hmm
It's got a low melting point.
hmm Yeah,
Mm,
it's not a good choice.
no.
Not a good choice. Mm. Well said.
Anyway.
Love that.
uh,
All right. Well, unless you have anything else to add, I think
no,
these are calling.
I think we're good. You didn't ask me my favorite Mexican food in canyons.
Oh, and I was really bummed to hear that Mexico doesn't have authentic restaurants like Taco Bell. That was the funniest post I ever read. It's hilarious because my husband he likes Taco Bell and I prefer not Taco Bell.
Yeah.
And so but every time he's like, but it's authentic. And so when you posted that post about the Mexican restaurants and the cheese.
Oh, yeah.
This is hilarious. What is your favorite Mexican food?
Anything my wife makes. She's an amazing cook.
Very cool.
Yeah. She doesn't make Taco Bell.
No. Very nice. That's good to hear. All right. Well, the canyons are calling. We should probably go.
Okay. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your time.
You betcha.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed my interview with Rich. I hope you join us next time for part 2, where we talk about the Canyon Guides International program that he's working on now. If you would like to find out more information about the totem, I have links for the totemrigging.com in the show notes. Also about canyons and crags, where he has courses and videos about all sorts of things canyoneering. I feel like in-person instruction in canyon practice as well as YouTube videos are very helpful. I definitely do not advocate for learning how to canyoneer through YouTube videos alone. So with in-person instruction and YouTube videos, I feel like you can learn a lot in canyoneering and you can go well. Anyway, that being said, I also have links for Rich's Instagram and his Facebook if you'd like to get a hold of him there. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can do that at thecanyonsarecalling@gmail.com. Also, thecanyonsarecalling.com. The Facebook group page is The Canyons Are Calling, and on Instagram, it's Canyons Are Calling. So anyway, I hear him calling now. I gotta go.